The gunshots cracked through the evening air like thunder as Beatrice Norwood ran through the tall grass, her heart hammering against her ribs and her lungs burning with each desperate breath. The year was 1875, and the Wyoming Territory had never felt so vast and unforgiving as it did now, with 3 men on horseback pursuing her across the open plains as twilight descended. Beatrice glanced over her shoulder, her honey-blonde hair falling loose from its pins as she spotted the riders closing in. Their silhouettes were menacing against the purple-orange sunset, and the distant shout of "There she is!" sent a fresh surge of terror through her veins. She had never intended to witness a murder. She had simply been gathering wildflowers near Silver Creek when she heard voices, angry, threatening voices, and then watched from behind a boulder as the Blackwell brothers gunned down a land surveyor in cold blood. The moment they spotted her, Beatrice knew her life depended on escape. The outline of a homestead appeared in the distance, a simple farmhouse, a corral, and a large barn. Hope fluttered in her chest. If she could reach it, perhaps she could hide. Perhaps someone would help her. With renewed determination, she hiked up her tattered blue skirt and ran faster, ignoring the sting of sharp grass against her ankles and the sound of hoofbeats growing louder behind her. The barn loomed closer now, its weathered boards and sturdy frame promising sanctuary. Beatrice threw herself against the side door, praying it wasn't locked. The wood gave way with a creak, and she slipped inside, quickly pulling it shut behind her. The interior was dim, smelling of hay, leather, and horses. She moved deeper into the shadows, her eyes adjusting to the low light as she searched for a place to hide. "They'll search here," she whispered to herself, panic making her voice tremble. "They'll find me." A soft nickering from one of the stalls caught her attention, and she froze. She wasn't alone. Beatrice held her breath, pressing herself against the wall behind a stack of hay bales. "Who's there?" a deep voice called out, and Beatrice nearly cried out in terror. A tall figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the barn, a lantern held high in one hand. In the warm glow, she could see a man with broad shoulders and a stern expression, dressed in dusty work clothes and a worn leather vest. A cowboy, by the look of him, with a revolver holstered at his hip. "Please," Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please help me. There are men coming. They want to kill me." The man stepped closer, raising the lantern to better see her face. His eyes were a startling blue, piercing in their intensity as they took in her disheveled appearance. The fear etched across her features. "Why are they after you?" he asked, his voice low and calm despite the urgency of the situation. "I saw them murder someone," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "The Blackwell brothers. They shot a surveyor from the railroad company, and I saw everything." The cowboy's expression hardened. He set the lantern down on a wooden barrel and moved to the barn door, peering out through a crack between the boards. "3 riders heading this way," he confirmed, his tone grim. "Blackwells, you say?" Beatrice nodded, fear constricting her throat. "I know of them. Nasty bunch." He turned back to her, decision made. "Stay hidden. Don't make a sound." He moved quickly then, guiding her to a stall at the back of the barn. "Get in there behind those hay bales. Cover yourself up good." Beatrice didn't hesitate, climbing into the empty stall and burrowing into the hay as the cowboy had instructed. She pulled the scratchy material over her body until only her eyes remained uncovered. "What's your name?" the man asked as he helped conceal her. "Beatrice," she whispered. "Beatrice Norwood." "Owen Garrick," he replied with a nod. "Don't worry, Miss Norwood. I won't let them find you." The sound of approaching horses grew louder, and Owen quickly moved away from her hiding place. He grabbed a pitchfork and pretended to be working as the barn door swung open with a bang. Beatrice held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she feared they might hear it. Through a small gap in the hay, She could see 3 men enter the barn, their spurs jingling with each step. She recognized them immediately as the Blackwell brothers. Henry, the eldest with the gray-streaked beard, Samuel, the middle brother with the vicious scar across his cheek, and Jeremiah, the youngest and perhaps the most dangerous of the 3, with cold, dead eyes that seemed to hold no mercy. "Evening, gentlemen," Owen greeted them casually, leaning on his pitchfork. "Something I can help you with?" Henry Blackwell stepped forward, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "We're looking for a woman. Young thing, blonde hair, blue dress. Seen anyone fitting that description?" "Can't say that I have," Owen replied evenly. "Been in here most of the evening, tending to my horses. Haven't seen a soul pass by." "Mind if we take a look around?" Samuel asked, though it wasn't really a question. Beatrice pressed herself deeper into the hay, terror clawing at her chest. Owen shrugged. "It's a free country, but I don't appreciate strangers disturbing my animals this time of night. Makes them skittish." "This won't take long," Jeremiah said with a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. The 3 brothers began to move through the barn, checking each corner and stall. Beatrice could hear them coming closer, the sound of boots on packed earth growing louder. She closed her eyes, sending up silent prayers. "What's in here?" Samuel asked, and Beatrice knew with sickening certainty that he was pointing to her hiding place. "Just hay," Owen replied. "Storing it for winter. Getting an early start this year." "Let's have a look anyway," Henry insisted. Beatrice heard the creak of the stall door opening and held her breath, body trembling beneath the hay. "I wouldn't disturb that pile if I were you," Owen said, his voice suddenly hard. "Got a nest of rattlers under there I've been meaning to deal with. Stirring them up now wouldn't be wise." There was a long pause, and then the sound of the stall door closing again. "Rattlers, huh?" Samuel sounded skeptical. "Yep, nasty ones too. Nearly got bit yesterday moving some of that hay." The brothers conferred in low voices, and Beatrice strained to hear what they were saying. Finally, Henry spoke again. "If you see this woman, you let us know. She's a thief who stole from our family. We aim to bring her to justice." "I'll keep an eye out," Owen promised, but there was an edge to his voice that made it clear he didn't believe their story. Footsteps retreated, and Beatrice heard the barn door open and close. Still, she didn't move, afraid it might be a trick. "They're mounting up," Owen said quietly after a moment. "But they're not leaving yet. They're talking outside." Beatrice remained frozen in place, barely daring to breathe as minutes ticked by like hours. Finally, she heard the sound of horses galloping away, growing fainter until silence descended once more. "They're gone," Owen announced, approaching her hiding place. "But they might come back. It's not safe for you to move just yet." He opened the stall door and helped clear away some of the hay. Beatrice emerged, brushing straw from her hair and clothing, her legs unsteady beneath her. "Thank you," she whispered, tears of relief and lingering fear filling her eyes. "You saved my life." Owen nodded, his expression solemn. "Those men have a reputation in these parts. If you truly witnessed them commit murder, they won't stop looking for you." "What am I going to do?" Beatrice asked, the full weight of her situation crashing down upon her. "I can't go back to town. They'll find me." "You'll stay here tonight," Owen decided. "In the house, not the barn. Tomorrow morning we'll figure out our next steps." Beatrice looked up at him, studying his face in the lantern light. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. His eyes, though serious, held a kindness that reassured her. "I don't want to put you in danger," she said. "I've handled worse than the Blackwells," he replied with quiet confidence. "Come on, let's get you inside. You look like you could use some food and rest." He picked up the lantern and offered his free hand to help her up. Beatrice took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip as he guided her to her feet. For the first time since witnessing the murder, she felt a small measure of safety return. As they made their way toward the door, Owen suddenly pulled her back into the shadows. "Wait," he whispered, peering through a crack in the wooden walls. "One of them's still out there. Looks like Jeremiah. He's circling the property." Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. "They don't believe you." "Appears not." Owen's jaw tightened as he considered their options. "We need to wait him out. I have a feeling he's going to try searching the barn again when he thinks I'm not looking." They retreated deeper into the barn, Owen extinguishing the lantern to avoid drawing attention. In the darkness, he led her to a small tack room at the rear of the building. "Stay here," he instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to make sure he doesn't get the drop on us." Before she could protest, Owen was gone, moving silently through the darkness with the practiced ease of someone who knew every inch of his property. Beatrice huddled in the corner of the tack room, surrounded by the smell of leather and saddle soap, straining to hear what was happening outside. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, she heard the soft creak of the barn door opening, followed by cautious footsteps. Someone was inside, moving stealthily through the darkness. "I know you're in here, girl," Jeremiah Blackwell's voice called out, sending a chill down Beatrice's spine. "No point in hiding. You're just making things harder on yourself." Beatrice pressed a hand over her mouth to stifle her breathing, her eyes wide as she tried to peer through the darkness. The footsteps were getting closer to the tack room. Suddenly, the sound of a gun being cocked echoed through the barn. "That's far enough, Blackwell." Owen's voice rang out, steady and authoritative. "I told you there was no one here. Now you're trespassing." "I don't take orders from ranch hands," Jeremiah spat, "especially ones who lie to my face. I'm not a hand. This is my property, and you're not welcome on it. Leave now before this gets ugly." There was a tense silence, and Beatrice could imagine the two men facing off in the darkness, each weighing their next move. "You're making a mistake, Garrick," Jeremiah finally said. "That woman is dangerous. She's wanted for crimes against my family." "Funny," Owen replied. "I haven't heard of any warrants out for a blonde woman in these parts. And if she was truly a criminal, you'd have gone to the sheriff instead of chasing her across the countryside with guns drawn. We handle our own justice. Not on my land, you don't." Another long silence followed, punctuated only by the soft nickering of one of the horses in its stall. "This isn't over," Jeremiah finally said. "We'll be watching this place." "You do that," Owen replied evenly, "and I'll be watching right back, with a shotgun." Footsteps retreated, followed by the sound of the barn door opening and closing once more. Beatrice didn't move, unsure if it was truly safe. A few moments later, the door to the tack room opened, and Owen appeared, a small lantern now lit in his hand. "He's gone," he confirmed. "But we need to move quickly. They'll be back, and next time they might bring more men." "What are we going to do?" Beatrice asked, rising to her feet on shaky legs. "First, we get you to the house. It's more defensible there." He handed her the lantern. "Stay close to me." They moved through the barn, Owen leading the way with his pistol drawn. Outside, the night had fully descended, a blanket of stars overhead and a silver crescent moon providing just enough light to see by. The farmhouse was about 50 yards away, a simple, sturdy structure with a wraparound porch and smoke curling from the chimney. "Quick now," Owen urged, and they dashed across the open space between buildings, Beatrice's heart in her throat as she imagined Jeremiah Blackwell watching from the darkness, taking aim with his rifle. They reached the porch without incident, and Owen hurried her inside, locking the door firmly behind them. The interior of the house was warm and surprisingly welcoming. A fire burned in the stone hearth, casting a golden glow over modest but comfortable furnishings. "Are you alone here?" Beatrice asked, suddenly aware that she might be intruding on a family home. "Yes, just me," Owen replied, moving through the house to check each window, drawing curtains closed. "Been on my own for about 3 years now, since my father passed." "I'm sorry to hear that," Beatrice said softly. Owen nodded in acknowledgement but didn't elaborate. "You must be hungry." "I've got stew on the stove, was just about to have supper when I heard someone in the barn." Now that he mentioned it, Beatrice realized she was famished. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, her day having taken such an unexpected and terrifying turn. "Thank you," she said. "That's very kind." Owen gestured toward a wooden chair at the kitchen table. "Sit, rest. I'll get you something to eat, and then you can tell me exactly what happened today." Beatrice sank into the chair gratefully, watching as Owen moved around his kitchen with efficiency, ladling stew into bowls and cutting thick slices of bread. There was something comforting about his calm demeanor, his quiet capability in the face of danger. He set a bowl before her, steam rising from the hearty mixture of beef and vegetables, along with the bread and a mug of hot coffee. Beatrice didn't realize how desperately hungry she was until the first bite touched her lips. She ate quickly, almost forgetting her manners in her haste to fill her empty stomach. Owen sat across from her, eating more slowly, his eyes occasionally flicking to the windows as if expecting trouble. "Thank you," Beatrice said again when she had finished, feeling somewhat embarrassed by her eagerness. "That was delicious." "You're welcome," Owen replied with a slight nod. "Now, I need to know exactly what you saw today, and who else might know you witnessed it." Beatrice took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the day, how she had gone to gather wildflowers near Silver Creek, an area she often visited during her walks from town. She explained that she worked as a teacher at the small schoolhouse in Silver Creek Junction, about 5 miles from Owen's ranch, and had been living in a boarding house in town for the past 8 months since arriving from Boston. "I heard voices arguing," she continued, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap as she recalled the scene. "I hid behind some rocks, thinking I would wait until they passed. That's when I saw them, the Blackwell brothers and a man I recognized as Mr. Peterson, the surveyor for the railroad." "James Peterson?" Owen asked, his brow furrowing. Beatrice nodded. "Yes, that's him. You know him? By reputation. Honest man, from what I hear." They were arguing about land boundaries. The Blackwells were insisting that the railroad had no right to cross their property, but Mr. Peterson was showing them maps, saying the route had been approved by the territorial government. She shuddered at the memory. Henry Blackwell called him a liar. Then Jeremiah just pulled his gun and shot him, right there in broad daylight, without warning. Owen's expression darkened. "Did anyone else see what happened?" "I don't think so. It was a remote spot. They dragged his body toward their horses, I assume to dispose of it somewhere. That's when I accidentally dislodged some rocks. They heard the noise and spotted me." She took a shaky breath. "I ran. I just ran as fast as I could through the woods, and eventually out onto the plains. They followed on horseback. I thought I would die out there, but then I saw your barn." "You did the right thing," Owen assured her. "But this puts us in a difficult position. The Blackwells own half the county. They have connections in town, friends in high places. Are you saying no one would believe me?" Beatrice asked, dismayed. "I'm saying it would be your word against theirs, and in these parts that's rarely a fair fight." Owen leaned forward, his expression grave. "They'll paint you as a confused woman who saw something that didn't happen, or worse. They'll claim you had some vendetta against them and invented the whole thing. But Mr. Peterson is dead. Surely his body will likely never be found. Owen finished for her. The Blackwells know these hills better than anyone. They have endless places to hide a body where it would never be discovered. The reality of her situation settled over Beatrice like a heavy shroud. She was a witness to murder, pursued by powerful men who would stop at nothing to silence her. In a place where justice was often determined by who had the most money or the biggest gun. "What can I do?" she whispered, feeling utterly lost. Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. "There's a U.S. Marshal who comes through these parts occasionally, Marshal Frank Dawson. He's honest, doesn't bow to local pressure. If we could get word to him, he might be able to help. But it would mean keeping you safe until he arrives, which could be days or even weeks. I can't ask you to put yourself in danger for that long," Beatrice protested. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Owen's gaze was steady, resolute. "I've had run-ins with the Blackwells before. This isn't the first time they've acted like they own everything and everyone around here. Someone needs to stand up to them." Before Beatrice could respond, the sound of a horse approaching drew their attention. Owen moved swiftly to the window, peering cautiously through a gap in the curtains. "Single rider," he reported. "Not one of the Blackwells. It's Doc Miller from town." He unlocked the door and stepped onto the porch as an elderly man dismounted from a chestnut mare, medical bag in hand. "Evening, Owen," the doctor called, his voice carrying through the open door. "Got your message about needing some supplies. Came as quick as I could." Beatrice looked at Owen in confusion. He hadn't sent for any doctor that she knew of. "Thanks for coming, Doc," Owen replied, helping the older man up the porch steps. "Let's talk inside." Dr. Miller entered the house, removing his hat to reveal a balding head with tufts of white hair above the ears. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Beatrice, but he offered a polite nod. "Miss," he greeted her, before turning a questioning gaze to Owen. "Doc, this is Miss Beatrice Norwood," Owen explained. "She's in trouble. Witnessed the Blackwell brothers murder James Peterson today, and now they're hunting her." The doctor's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Peterson? The railroad surveyor?" Beatrice nodded. "Yes, sir. They shot him in cold blood when he showed them the approved route for the new railway line." Dr. Miller sank into a chair, shaking his head. "Lord have mercy. I'd heard rumors the Blackwells were against the railroad coming through, but murder." He looked up at Owen. "What do you need from me, son?" "I didn't actually send for you," Owen admitted. "But since you're here, we could use your help. We need to get word to Marshal Dawson, and we need supplies to hold out here until he arrives. The Blackwells will be watching the roads, so it's not safe for Miss Norwood to leave." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "Marshal Dawson was in Cheyenne last I heard, but that was a week ago. I can send a telegram, make it urgent." He glanced at Beatrice. "You're the schoolteacher in town, aren't you? From back east?" "Yes," she confirmed, surprised he knew of her. "My granddaughter Charlotte is in your class. Speaks very highly of you." He smiled briefly before his expression grew serious again. "People will notice if you don't show up to teach tomorrow." "I hadn't even thought of that," Beatrice admitted, dismayed. "We'll need a story," Owen said, pacing slightly. "Something to explain her absence without raising suspicion." Dr. Miller considered this. "I could say you've come down with scarlet fever. That would keep folks away. Give us a reason to quarantine you here for a couple of weeks if needed." "Would people believe I'm staying here, though?" Beatrice asked, concerned about her reputation. "An unmarried woman staying alone with a bachelor would cause terrible scandal. We'll say I brought you here because you were found ill on the road, and that my housekeeper is tending to you," the doctor suggested. "You don't have a housekeeper, Doc," Owen pointed out. "No, but Mrs. Finch comes to clean for me twice a week. She can say she's staying here to help." She owes me a favor after I treated her boy's broken leg last winter. Owen nodded, looking impressed. That might work. Can you arrange it all tomorrow? I'll head back now and get things in motion, the doctor said, rising to his feet. The Blackwells don't usually bother with an old man like me. I can move about town without raising suspicion. He opened his medical bag and removed several rolls of bandages, a bottle of laudanum, and some other supplies, placing them on the table. Just in case, he explained. I'll bring more food and necessities tomorrow night. Is there anything specific you need, Miss Norwood? Beatrice, overwhelmed by the kindness of these two men, virtual strangers, felt tears prick at her eyes. Just a change of clothes, perhaps, and maybe paper and pencil to write notes for my students. The doctor nodded. I'll see what I can do. He turned to Owen. Keep your rifle loaded, son. The Blackwells won't give up easily. I know it, Owen replied grimly. Thank you, document. Dr. Miller replaced his hat and made his way to the door. Be careful, both of you. I'll be back tomorrow night after dark. Once the doctor had departed, Owen secured the door again and turned to Beatrice. You should get some rest. You can take my bed. I'll sleep out here by the fire. I couldn't possibly take your bed, Beatrice protested. You've had a harder day than most people have in a lifetime, Owen insisted. The bedroom's down that hallway. There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. Beatrice wanted to argue further but found she lacked the energy. The events of the day, the terror of being pursued, the relief of finding sanctuary, it all crashed down upon her at once, leaving her exhausted to her very bones. Thank you, she said simply. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. Owen shook his head. No need for that. Get some sleep. We'll figure out our next steps in the morning. Beatrice made her way to the bedroom, a simple but clean space with a sturdy wooden bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a basin and pitcher. She poured some water, washing the dirt and sweat from her face and hands, then removed her torn and soiled dress, leaving her in her chemise and petticoat. As she slipped beneath the quilt on Owen's bed, surrounded by the unfamiliar scent of him, clean soap, leather, and something distinctly masculine, Beatrice found herself pondering the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place. Just that morning, she had been a simple schoolteacher, her life orderly and predictable. Now she was a witness to murder, hiding from killers, dependent on the protection of a man she'd only just met. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive as her mind replayed the day's events. The crack of the gunshot that ended Mr. Peterson's life. The cold, merciless look in Jeremiah Blackwell's eyes as he pulled the trigger. The terror of being pursued across the open plains. And then, the unexpected salvation in the form of Owen Garrick, a solitary cowboy who had risked his own safety to protect her without hesitation. She wondered about him, what kind of man he was, why he lived alone, what had led him to this remote ranch in Wyoming Territory. There was a quiet strength about him that reassured her, a steadiness in his blue eyes that made her believe his promise to keep her safe. Eventually, lulled by the distant sounds of Owen moving about in the other room and the crackling of the fire, Beatrice drifted into an uneasy sleep, her dreams filled with running figures and the thundering of hooves. She woke with a start some hours later, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. Pale moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the floor. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she had gotten there. Then it all came rushing back: the murder, the chase, the barn. A sound from outside caught her attention, the soft whinny of a horse, followed by low voices. Beatrice froze, listening intently, her heart beginning to race once more. Were the Blackwells back? Had they brought reinforcements? She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the wooden floorboards as she made her way to the bedroom door. Opening it a crack, she peered into the main room of the house. Owen was awake, standing by one of the windows with a rifle in his hands. He turned at the sound of the door opening, his expression alert but calm. "Someone's out there," Beatrice whispered, though she suspected he already knew. Owen nodded. "2 riders, circling the property. Been at it for about 20 minutes. The Blackwells. Can't tell for sure, but it seems likely." He moved away from the window, approaching her. "Stay away from the windows. If they see movement, they might start shooting." Beatrice hugged herself, suddenly aware that she was standing before him in just her undergarments. Owen seemed to realize this at the same moment, quickly averting his eyes. "You should get back to the bedroom," he said, his voice gruff. "It's safer. There are no windows facing the direction they're coming from." "I can't just hide while you face them alone," Beatrice protested. A small, surprised smile tugged at the corner of Owen's mouth. "You've got spirit, Miss Norwood. But right now, the best thing you can do is stay out of sight." Before she could argue further, the sound of a rifle shot shattered the night. A window exploded inward, sending glass shards flying across the room. "Get down!" Owen shouted, diving toward her and pulling her to the floor as more shots followed. They crawled toward the hallway, bullets splintering wood and thudding into furniture around them. Once they reached the relative safety of the bedroom, Owen pushed the heavy chest of drawers against the door as a barricade. "They're trying to flush us out," he explained, checking his rifle. "Or get a lucky shot through a window." "What do we do?" Beatrice asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the terror coursing through her. "We wait them out. They can't approach the house directly too exposed. They're hoping we'll panic and run." Another volley of shots rang out, followed by a man's voice calling through the night. "We know she's in there, Garrick. Send her out and we'll leave you be." "That's Samuel Blackwell," Owen said grimly. He moved to the window, carefully peering out from the side of the curtain. "They're still keeping their distance. Smart of them." "Hand over the woman," Samuel called again. "She's a liar and a thief. Justice will be served." Owen shook his head in disgust. "They're sticking to their story, trying to make it seem legitimate in case anyone hears." "Will anyone hear?" Beatrice asked hopefully. "Could someone come to help?" "Nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. Even if they heard gunshots, they might not think much of it. Not unusual to hear shooting out here." Owen checked his ammunition. "I have plenty of rounds. We can outlast them." Beatrice sank onto the edge of the bed, the reality of their situation settling heavily upon her. "I've brought this danger to your door. I'm so sorry." Owen glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. "You didn't ask for any of this. You just happened to witness something terrible. Still, you barely know me. You have no reason to risk your life for mine." "I have every reason," Owen replied firmly. "What kind of man would I be if I turned away someone in need? Especially when I know they're innocent." Another shot rang out, this one hitting somewhere near the roof, sending dust drifting down from the ceiling. "They're getting impatient," Owen observed. He handed Beatrice a small revolver from his belt. "Do you know how to use this?" She took the gun hesitantly, its weight unfamiliar in her hand. "I've never fired a weapon before. It's simple enough. Point and pull the trigger. But it's just a precaution. I don't intend to let them get close enough for you to need it." The shooting continued sporadically for another hour, but as Owen had predicted, the Blackwells didn't approach the house directly. Eventually, the gunfire ceased altogether, replaced by an eerie silence. "Are they gone?" Beatrice whispered after several minutes had passed without a shot. "Maybe," Owen said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Or they might be trying a different approach. Stay here while I check." "Be careful," she urged as he moved the chest away from the door. Owen nodded and slipped out of the bedroom, rifle ready. Beatrice held her breath, listening to his cautious footsteps moving through the house. After what felt like an eternity, he returned. "No sign of them," he reported. "But they left a message." "A message?" "Shot it into the front door." His expression was grim. "Says, 'Tomorrow we bring more men.'" Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. "They're coming back with reinforcements." "Seems that way." Owen ran a hand through his hair, thinking, "We need to prepare. The house is defensible, but not against a large group with rifles. Could we leave? Try to reach town?" Owen shook his head. "Too risky. They'll be watching the roads. And in town, they have allies who could help them get to you." He was quiet for a moment, considering their options. "There's an old line shack about 3 miles from here in the foothills. It's well hidden. My father used it during hunting season. We could move there before dawn. Wait for Doc Miller to return with news about the marshal." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than waiting for the Blackwells to return with more men. Beatrice nodded her agreement. "We'll need supplies," she said practically, pushing aside her fear to focus on what needed to be done. "Food, water, blankets." "I'll gather what we need," Owen replied, looking slightly impressed by her composure. "Try to get some more rest. We'll leave before first light." Beatrice doubted she could sleep with the threat of the Blackwells' return hanging over them, but she lay down on the bed again, listening to Owen moving about the house, preparing for their departure. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring, she found herself drawing comfort from his steady presence. She must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing she knew, Owen was gently shaking her awake. The room was still dark, the first hints of dawn not yet visible. "It's time," he said quietly. Beatrice rose quickly. Accepting the bundle of clothing, he offered her a simple shirt and trousers that would be more practical for their journey than her torn dress. "They're my old clothes," Owen explained, looking slightly embarrassed. "They'll be too big, but easier to move in than a skirt." "Thank you," Beatrice said, genuinely grateful. "Would you mind?" She gestured for him to turn around. "Of course." Owen turned his back, giving her privacy to change. The clothes were indeed too large, but Beatrice secured the trousers with a piece of rope and rolled up the sleeves of the shirt. When she was decent, Owen turned back, his eyes widening slightly at the transformation. "You look," he began, then seemed to think better of whatever he was going to say. "Are you ready?" Beatrice nodded, tying her hair back with a strip of fabric. "As ready as I'll ever be." Owen led the way through the house, which looked drastically different in the aftermath of the shooting. Windows were shattered, walls splintered with bullet holes, furniture overturned. He had packed 2 saddlebags with supplies: food, water, ammunition, medical supplies, blankets. "We'll take the horses," he explained in a hushed voice, "but lead them on foot for the first mile or so to minimize noise. The Blackwells might have left someone to watch the property." They slipped out the back door and made their way to the barn in the pre-dawn darkness. Owen quickly saddled 2 horses, his own sturdy chestnut gelding and a smaller, gentle mare for Beatrice. "Have you ridden before?" he asked as he adjusted the stirrups for her. "A little," Beatrice admitted, "though not since I was a girl. Daisy here is as gentle as they come. She'll take good care of you." They led the horses out of the barn and away from the house, moving slowly and quietly across the property toward a line of trees that marked the edge of Owen's land. Beatrice's heart was pounding, every shadow seeming to conceal a potential threat. But they reached the trees without incident, and Owen visibly relaxed a fraction. "We can mount up here," he said, helping Beatrice onto her horse before swinging up onto his own. As the first pale light of dawn began to illuminate the landscape, they rode deeper into the trees, following a narrow trail that wound gradually upward into the foothills. Beatrice found her riding skills returning to her, though she was grateful for Daisy's placid nature. Owen rode slightly ahead, constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of pursuit. They traveled in silence for the most part, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hooves on the forest floor and the occasional call of a bird greeting the new day. As the sun rose higher, casting dappled light through the canopy of trees, Beatrice couldn't help but notice the rugged beauty of the land around them. In different circumstances, she might have enjoyed this ride through the wilderness, with its towering pines, glimpses of distant mountains, and wildflowers dotting the clearings they passed. "How much farther?" she asked when they paused at a small stream to let the horses drink. "Another mile or so," Owen replied, dismounting to fill their canteens. "The shack is just beyond that ridge." He pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. Beatrice slid carefully from her saddle, wincing at the soreness in her legs and back. She wasn't accustomed to riding, and the stress of their situation had left her muscles tense and aching. Owen noticed her discomfort. "We can rest here for a bit if you need to." "No, I'm fine," she assured him, not wanting to delay their journey. "The sooner we reach the shack, the better." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "There's a stream near the shack where you can wash up when we arrive, and I'll make us a proper breakfast. Don't want you fainting from hunger under my watch." Beatrice found herself smiling despite their circumstances. "I'm made of sturdier stuff than that, Mr. Garrick." "Owen," he corrected her. "If we're going to be hiding out together, seems we should be on a first-name basis." "Owen, then," she agreed. "And you must call me Beatrice." A faint smile crossed his face, transforming his serious expression and making him look younger, more approachable. "Beatrice it is." They mounted up again and continued their journey, the trail growing steeper and more rugged as they climbed higher into the foothills. The forest was denser here, the trees older and more majestic, creating a cathedral-like atmosphere that felt removed from the dangers they had left behind. Finally, they crested a small rise, and the line shack came into view, a simple, sturdy structure built of logs, with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. It was nestled against the hillside, partially concealed by surrounding trees and boulders, making it nearly invisible from a distance. "It's not much," Owen said as they approached, "but it's solid and well hidden." "It looks perfect," Beatrice replied honestly. They dismounted, and Owen led the horses to a small corral behind the shack while Beatrice examined their new sanctuary. The interior was basic but clean, a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table and chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, and shelves stocked with preserved food and supplies. "My father was a firm believer in being prepared," Owen explained when he joined her inside. "He kept this place stocked in case he ever needed to weather out a storm or spend a few days hunting." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Beatrice observed. A shadow crossed Owen's face. "He was. Best man I ever knew." He busied himself building a fire in the hearth, clearly not wanting to elaborate further. Beatrice sensed his reluctance to discuss his father and didn't press the issue. Instead, she helped unpack their supplies, organizing them on the shelves while Owen got the fire going. "I'll show you where the stream is," he said once the flames were crackling merrily in the fireplace. "You can freshen up while I prepare some breakfast." The stream was just a short walk from the shack, a clear, cold ribbon of water flowing down from the higher elevations. Overhanging trees created a private spot where Beatrice could wash away the dust and sweat of their journey. The cold water was invigorating, and when she returned to the shack, she felt revived despite her lingering exhaustion. Owen had been true to his word about breakfast. The small table was set with plates of fried salt pork, biscuits, and coffee that smelled heavenly to Beatrice's empty stomach. "This looks wonderful," she said, sitting down across from him. "It's simple fare," Owen replied with a shrug, "but filling." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, both hungrier than they had realized. As she finished her meal, Beatrice found herself studying Owen more openly than she had before. In the soft morning light filtering through the single window, she could see the details of his face more clearly: the small scar above his right eyebrow, the crinkles at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more than she'd yet witnessed, the strong line of his jaw now covered in a day's growth of stubble. He caught her looking and raised an eyebrow questioningly. "I was just thinking," Beatrice said, slightly embarrassed to be caught staring, "that I know almost nothing about you, yet I've trusted you with my life." Owen considered this. "What would you like to know? How long have you lived here? On your ranch, I mean." "All my life," he replied, refilling their coffee cups. "My father built that house when he first claimed the land, before I was born. He and my mother ran cattle for 20 years before she passed." "I'm sorry," Beatrice said softly. "How old were you?" 12. His voice was matter-of-fact, but she could sense the old pain beneath the surface. "Father raised me after that. Taught me everything I know about ranching, about being a man. And he passed 3 years ago, you said?" Owen nodded. "Pneumonia took him. Winter of '72. Doctor said there was nothing to be done." "That must have been difficult," Beatrice sympathized. "Being left alone like that." He shrugged, his expression guarded. "I manage. The ranch keeps me busy enough." "Do you have any other family?" "No. No siblings, no cousins nearby. Father had a brother in Kansas, but we lost touch years ago." Owen turned the questions back on her. "What about you? What brought you all the way from Boston to Wyoming Territory?" Beatrice smiled slightly. "The promise of adventure, I suppose, and necessity. After my father died, there wasn't much left for me in Boston. I saw an advertisement for teachers needed in the Western Territories, and it seemed like a sign. Your mother. She died when I was very young. I barely remember her." Beatrice traced the rim of her coffee cup with a fingertip. "My father raised me much as yours did you. He was a professor of literature at Harvard. He believed in education for women, encouraged me to become a teacher." "He sounds like a progressive man." "He was. Quite unconventional in many ways. He taught me to think for myself, to question everything." Her smile turned sad. "I think he would have approved of my decision to come west, though perhaps not of the trouble I found myself in." "I don't think anyone plans on witnessing a murder," Owen observed dryly. "No, I suppose not." Beatrice sighed. "I keep thinking about Mr. Peterson. Does he have a family? Is there a wife somewhere waiting for him to come home, not knowing he never will?" "He was married," Owen confirmed. 2 children, I believe. Live over in Silver Creek Junction." The knowledge made Beatrice's heart ache. Those poor children. And the Blackwells would have gotten away with it completely if I hadn't been there. "They still might," Owen said grimly. "Unless Marshall Dawson believes your story and can find evidence to support it. The evidence is probably buried in some remote canyon by now," Beatrice said, her voice hollow. "Maybe, maybe not." Owen rose from the table, gathering their empty plates. "The Blackwells are arrogant. They might have gotten careless, left something behind." Beatrice helped him clean up their breakfast things, her mind turning over their situation. "How long do you think we'll need to hide here?" "Depends on when Doc Miller can reach the marshal, and how quickly Dawson can get here." Owen checked his pocket watch. "Doc said he'd come to the house tonight. When he finds us gone, he'll worry. Is there any way to get a message to him?" Owen considered this. "I could ride back toward the ranch this evening, try to intercept him. It would be risky, though. The Blackwells are probably watching the property." "It seems too dangerous," Beatrice said, concerned. "Perhaps we should wait a day, see if he returns tomorrow night instead." "We'll decide later," Owen said, not committing to either option. For now, we should both get some rest. Neither of us has slept properly, and we need to stay alert. He was right, of course. Beatrice could feel the exhaustion weighing on her, making her thoughts fuzzy around the edges. You take the bed, Owen insisted when she hesitated. I'll be fine on the floor. We could take turns, she suggested. There's no need for you to be uncomfortable. I've slept in worse places, he assured her with a small smile. The bed's yours. I insist. Too tired to argue, Beatrice accepted his chivalry and lay down on the narrow bed, pulling a blanket over herself. Despite her concerns about their situation, the events of the past 24 hours caught up with her quickly, and she was asleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow. She dreamed of running through endless fields, pursuers always just behind her, never able to find sanctuary no matter how far she fled. In her dream, she called out for Owen, but her voice made no sound, and he couldn't hear her pleas for help. Beatrice woke with a start, disoriented and alarmed until she remembered where she was. The shack was quiet, golden afternoon light slanting through the window suggesting she had slept for several hours. Owen was nowhere to be seen. Panic fluttered in her chest until she heard movement outside. Rising quickly, she went to the window and saw Owen chopping wood near the edge of the clearing, his shirt discarded in the summer heat, muscles working smoothly beneath sun-bronzed skin. Beatrice knew she should look away. It wasn't proper to stare at a man in such a state of undress, but she found herself mesmerized by the fluid strength of his movements, the concentration evident in his profile as he swung the axe in precise, powerful strokes. She had never been this close to a man who lived such a physically demanding life. The men she had known in Boston had been scholars, businessmen, clerks, men whose hands were soft from holding pens rather than calloused from hard labor. There was something compelling about Owen's capability, his self-sufficiency in this wild place. Realizing the impropriety of her thoughts, Beatrice stepped away from the window, her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She busied herself tidying the already neat shack, trying to ignore the strange fluttering in her stomach whenever she thought of Owen's strong hands, his intense blue eyes, the way he had put himself in danger to protect her without hesitation. When Owen came back inside some time later, shirt back in place and arms laden with split wood, Beatrice was sitting at the table, staring at nothing in particular, lost in thought. "You're awake," he observed, setting the wood beside the fireplace. "Feel any better?" "Much thank you," she replied, hoping her earlier thoughts didn't show on her face. "You should have woken me sooner. I didn't mean to sleep half the day away. You needed the rest." He poured water from a pitcher into a basin and washed his hands and face. "And there wasn't much to do here anyway. Have you decided about trying to meet Dr. Miller?" Beatrice asked. Owen dried his face on a towel, his expression turning serious. "I've been thinking about it. I believe I should go. If the Blackwells have brought more men as they threatened, Doc could be riding into a dangerous situation. He might not even make it to the house. But what if they see you? What if they follow you back here?" "I'll be careful," he promised. "I know these hills better than they do. I can approach the ranch from a direction they won't expect, stay hidden in the trees." Beatrice knew he was right, but the thought of him riding back toward danger filled her with dread. "When will you go?" "Soon. Doc said he'd come after dark, but he'll likely start out while there's still light." Owen checked his rifle and pistol. "I'll take just enough supplies for a night if I need to wait for him." "You'll have everything you need here. What if you don't come back?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, her fear making her voice tremble. Owen looked up, meeting her eyes. "I'll come back, Beatrice. I promise you that." There was such certainty in his voice that she found herself believing him, despite the dangers she knew he would face. "Just be careful," she said softly. "Always am." He offered her a reassuring smile. "There's food in the pantry. The rifle on the wall is loaded just in case, though I don't expect any trouble to find this place. Bar the door behind me, and don't open it for anyone but me or Doc Miller." Beatrice nodded, committing his instructions to memory. As Owen prepared to leave, gathering his weapons and a small pack of supplies, she felt an irrational urge to ask him to stay, to forget about Dr. Miller and the marshal and just remain hidden here with her, safe in their secluded sanctuary. But she knew that wasn't practical. They needed help if they were ever to emerge from hiding, if the Blackwells were ever to face justice for their crime. At the door, Owen paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. For a moment, she thought he might say something more, but he simply nodded once and stepped outside. Beatrice watched through the window as he mounted his horse and rode away, disappearing into the trees. She barred the door as instructed and then stood in the center of the small shack, suddenly feeling very alone. To combat the silence, she busied herself with examining the supplies on the shelves, organizing what they had, making mental notes of how long they could survive here if necessary. She found a worn deck of cards and practiced shuffling them, a skill her father had taught her years ago. She even hummed softly to herself, old songs from her childhood in Boston. But as the afternoon waned and evening approached, bringing with it lengthening shadows and a deepening quiet, Beatrice found it increasingly difficult to keep her worries at bay. What if the Blackwells had captured Owen? What if Dr. Miller never arrived? What if she was left alone here, miles from anywhere, with no one knowing where to find her? The crack of a twig outside made her freeze, her heart leaping into her throat. Carefully, she moved to the window, peering out into the gathering dusk. Was it Owen returning already? It seemed too soon. Nothing moved in the clearing before the shack. The forest was quiet, too quiet, she realized, with none of the usual bird sounds that had filled the air earlier. A floorboard creaked behind her. Beatrice whirled around, a scream rising in her throat, only to have it cut off by a rough hand clamping over her mouth. "Not a sound," Jeremiah Blackwell hissed in her ear, his other hand holding a knife to her throat. "Or it'll be your last."